Istanbul was a place that we wanted to visit for a really long time, where East meets West, a city that reflects the cultural influences of the many empires that once ruled here. We were intrigued by the melting pot of traditions and cultures, the colorful and vibrant architecture of the city streets, the famous Turkish coffee, tea, and endless desserts. Our travels east have shaped our lives and ideas about the world. As we enter the last episode of this series, we're closing this chapter and changing the direction of our creative content. Just as a simple change in our diet leaves a deep impression on our nature, a new way of looking at the world can change our entire destiny. Stay with us for the journey.
Let's get into the topic, I think, for our episode today.
So in May, Richard decided to do a little meat cleanse and commit himself to 90 days of being a vegetarian.
And for Martina, she's been a vegetarian now almost 3 years. So that's been a bit of a challenge for us. For me, it was a big challenge because having to make concessions and I guess negotiate where we were going to eat, because we had to find something that was suitable for both her and for me because I was a meat eater.
Which made it quite difficult because depending on where you are, like in Bali, being a vegetarian is pretty simple.
And that's part of the reason I chose to do it there to start. For me, it was just a matter of seeing and proving to myself whether it was something that I could do if I stuck to it.
Commit to. And also see how your body feels, right?
Yeah, like I really wanted to know. I wanted to know, like my whole thought process behind it was like, okay, well maybe I'm gonna start to feel better and I'm gonna start to feel a little bit more positive. So I wanted to try and see what was gonna change within my own body chemistry and my own mental state. Sticking to that was easier, I think, than I expected it to be. I thought there was going to be...
Because of the setting?
Well, because of the setting. Bali has a lot of vegetarian, a lot of vegan options. And I branched out to try a lot of those things too.
Vegan?
Raw vegan, not something I think I would do. My stomach just...
You would eat it from time to time.
Taste was okay.
Yeah,
like,
you would eat it from time to time. I just don't think it kind of made your stomach a little...
I think maybe that's an important thing to kind of take away from this, is that it doesn't have to be all about meat. And I think that in today's day and age, in today's society, I think there's a number of different ways that you can justify becoming a vegetarian. And I think that's something that we should go into.
Yes, let's do that. But I also just want to note that Richard being so committed really made me re-examine myself and my own commitment and not making any exceptions, because this was something I did for a very personal reason of my connection to animals. And it even pushed me further to kind of try to go vegan, because I started to reflect on being a vegetarian for my point of view is not really enough if I'm really thinking about why it's important to me. So thanks for that, because you really strengthened my commitment to it, and I think I needed that.
And that was also something I didn't ask of you either during that process.
But it did. It was really, really amazing. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so let's talk about why.
I think the first thing obviously is like everybody has this compassion for animals, and I think that was the first reason that convinced you.
I always felt a really strong connection to animals, especially dogs, but all animals, like even cats that I'm not particularly a fan of and I don't connect with personality-wise. I still love every animal. I would never want them to get hurt or to be in pain or suffer. And so when Richard and I left for our trip to Vietnam, we started in Hanoi, which is in northern Vietnam, and we were walking through kind of a non-touristy part of town, and I'd read about this before. I knew that consuming dog meat was something that did happen. I don't know, I didn't really expect to see it firsthand within the first few days that we were there, and you know, seeing those dogs stuffed in cages and hearing the sounds.
Just on the side of the road, I remember, and chained and in cages.
I was
whining.
like beside myself. I was like shaking and crying, and I was like, I have to do something. And Richard's like, what are you gonna do? Like, go buy them and put them where? Like, this is a part of their culture. My first instinct was such anger and like a disgust and like, I don't want to be here. And then I started started to think, like, how judgmental of meat, because
What's the
here
difference?
here I am eating foie and pho and eating buncha, which is like one of
buncha
our
was
favorite
amazing.
Vietnamese meals
Really
with pork
good.
in it, and I'm going,
And then fish sauce.
yeah, exactly,
So
and
it's
I'm going
completely meat based.
right, and I'm going, okay, so why are those animals classified as less worthy?
When you're doing it because you care about animals and you don't want animals to be suffering, first you have to go through it with your diet, but then you have to realize and understand how many things have animal products in them.
Yeah.
And then you shift your mentality to like, okay, well, I can take myself and I can say this, but is that enough? I now have to advocate and I now have to push other people to do the same because I believe that this is wrong.
And if they literally are looking at it like many vegetarians and vegans, even more so, think it's like a genocide against a species.
Yes.
So for them, it's imperative to stand up and advocate. To them, they look at it as if it's like the animal, I don't want to say Holocaust because, I don't want to apply that to anything else, but it's basically the elimination of an entire species or several species. So for them, it's an imperative to fight and advocate, because who is going to fight for these animals if they don't?
And I think that the reality is that there's a lot of truth to that, because look at what's happening in the Amazon right now, and they're clear cutting and setting fires to burn the forest so they have room for one animal or two animals, and how many species are just being wiped away in those fires with no care or concern whatsoever. And these are beautiful living creatures that don't deserve to have their homes taken away from them.
The ecological diversity of the Amazon, and not just the Amazon, but so many rainforests and places around the world that are suffering because of deforestation, mainly because of, like Richard said, clear cutting forests for agriculture, for cattle. And also for palm oil in Indonesia, the orangutans and what's happened to the rhinoceros in Indonesia, and how many animals have gone extinct or are now critically endangered because of our habits, because of what we choose to consume. And for me, it comes down to, we're at a day and age where you should try to understand that you don't need it. I think that's the biggest thing, is people always come with the argument like, but like, what are these teeth for? And we've been doing it for so long. And it's like, there's enough science out there to show you now. The number one thing people always ask is, what about your protein?
Well, and that's
plant
the thing.
Protein exists. Like,
but like most people don't know that. It's always been pushed that it's like, okay,
by who?
Meat and milk.
By the meat and dairy industry, because they profit from it.
And that gets into, our next point of like, okay, another reason why not to eat meat is corporations. And I think that's something we should get into.
They're making money off of our ignorance.
Yes. And it's been passed into law to continue to make us more ignorant.
Of course.
Where there's no filming allowed inside all of these
factories.
Because they know if that gets out,
if the consumer sees it,
then they're like, well, that's where our meat's coming from. I
don't want to eat it anymore.
I don't want to eat that. Then on top of that, the pharmaceutical companies and how much they pump into these animals,
antibiotics,
and first to keep them healthy because they're crowding them into these small places, but then also to make them grow faster. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, you get a lot of illnesses from the amount of meat that you consume. So then the pharmaceutical companies give you prescriptions in order to help you with your diet.
And because if you're consuming so many antibiotics through your animal consumption, what happens is you're becoming immune to those antibiotics. So what does that mean when you get sick and you need an antibiotic? Your system isn't going to respond to it anymore. So it's...
If you want to fight against corporations, and that kind of brings me to the second point, if that's who you're angry against, stop eating meat.
And I think we touched on it, we just didn't kind of identify it as a point, the environment, because climate change, people can say what they want. I think it's pretty evident if you look around the world today, what's happening to our natural resources, what's happening to the biodiversity of everything on our planet.
But I think it's hard for people to actually rationalize that because the immediate impact is not on them, and most people generally really only care about themselves and how it impacts them. And I think you have to understand that there's not going to be anything left.
That's what I'm saying.
And I think you have to start doing something now. Like, we want to preserve that beauty. Our connection with nature has completely disintegrated.
Yeah.
And with our rise in technology, and we're just looking at our phones all the time, looking at our devices, and we're not worried or focused on any of the issues that are actually happening.
And when I say also like environmental impact, I'm talking about what we mentioned, the deforestation and all that, but also from cattle stock and livestock rearing. I think they say it's, I don't want to say the percentage because I don't know, maybe we'll put it up after, but there's a huge amount of that's where greenhouse gases are coming from.
If you're going to argue that you're not getting what you need from fruits and vegetables
and grains
because you're not eating meat, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And I can say that from going through the experience. I mean, I was still eating eggs, I was still eating a lot of cheese, so that part of it is like, okay, I wasn't doing it at that point for care for animals, but it's something that's changing in my mentality. And I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and advocate that that's something that you have to do, and I'm like, oh, you're bad or you're wrong. You're not bad or wrong. You're programmed to think a certain way because of how you grew up, or not think, and maybe it's okay for you.
Because you know what, I think most people, I've come across them, I was one of them, which is like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to watch movies like Earthlings. I don't want to see what actually happens, because if I see it, how can I turn my head and pretend it's not happening? Remember that video that I showed you that she said, never underestimate the power of willful ignorance. And that's kind of the thing. It's so easy to turn our head if it's not right in front of us. And I think it's time, maybe look up from our social media and our phones and look at what's happening to our world. Look how we're treating each other, look how we're treating animals. And I feel like maybe if that shift happens, that could be a shift for humans too, and how we treat each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if we're treating animals that way, if we're treating the planet that way, like we're treating each other that way. So
I think we'll leave it there. We've got to catch our flight. Bye.